не хожу на рейвы, не слушаю метель. Капаю на нервы, собираю с вечера портфель. Не отношусь к тем, кто стервы.
And it's as I always say, that the less time the signal spends in the digital domain, the less damage it suffers. That really offends people, I'm pleased to say. Yes.
Like going back a little bit to music, you know, not with formats, like vinyl or this. And if I could, I'll preface it with one of my favorite literary theories, which is new criticism. If you're looking at a poem, especially, or, you know, it could be painting, could be short story, but mainly with a poem, they say that the best way to look at any piece of art is forgetting about the historical context, forgetting about the author's intention, forgetting about all of these cultural meanings of that piece. So I guess the question is, when you're suggesting different pieces of music to people, is there kind of pushback, like, oh, I don't understand classical, or it's...
Yeah, you get that along.
That perfect?
But I mean, at the end of the day, it you know, if you just let the music speak to you, and irrespective of you know, whether you are familiar with it or not, then you know, most people can access it if they sort of let the barrier down or let their guard down. Because music is really just it's just a different kind of language. But it speaks to us in a way that no language can access. I mean, even your own language. There are things when you listen to music that you can express feelings in music. I think it was Victor Hugo that said something like, music expresses what words cannot. Now, he was a pretty good writer, so he must have had some idea. And I think that you know, I think the big problem we have now, in a way, as an industry, is that we are when you go to hi-fi shows, for example, the kind of music that's played there is really, it's very mechanistic, and it's very designed to make whatever equipment is being presented sound as attractive as possible.
Mm-hmm. And the criteria that people use for what that involves has really more to do with the packaging of the sound
rather than the actual music played.
Yeah.
And I think that the reviewing press bears a great deal of the responsibility for that,
Mm-hmm.
because the words we use to describe sound from a hi-fi system, whether it's a single component or complete system, doesn't make any difference, really comes down to this: does it image? Does it have depth? Does it have this? Does it have that? And that's nothing to do with the music.
It's everything. That's just the way the recording is packaged.
Mm-hmm.
The musical content is something completely different.
If a composer came up with a piece of music and recorded it, do you think that the intention of that composer can and should come through the music?
Like it's interesting you say that. Like the last piece that was played, and we didn't record this at the request of the conductor,
Mm-hmm.
Was the last piece that Tchaikovsky wrote before he committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very eerie and very strange, and I can see why he didn't want it recorded. Because it was one of these pieces. I wasn't actually familiar with that piece of music, and I've listened to a lot of different Tchaikovsky compositions, but it sort of set a very strange atmosphere. And I suspect that was probably the intention.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think a lot of music is. I mean, I think a lot of modern. I sat on the judging panel for several years, in fact, of an international music competition called Master Prize, which was basically a competition for modern classical composers writing modern classical music.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably some of the worst music I've ever heard. I mean, the conclusion I came to was that modern classical music is written by people that are interested in impressing other composers, and that don't really care what the content is. It's I mean, shallow is not. It's not really shallow.
Most of it's meaningless. And I think that makes it very difficult to listen to.
Technical, but not
very technical. And if you're really into that kind of
thing, which I am not, then it was painful to sit and listen to a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. So, if I may add a twist to it. So, especially now in the last however many years, there's a word that has come into English called cancel, like cancel culture.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like it's like the opposite of, taking away the historical context or the author's intention or this or that. I've heard it's a lot less with classical, but I mean, you might have like Wagner in that, it's okay, what was this? What was going on at the time? Should I be listening to this? Or there's a lot of current, if you take away the historical context or what the person might have done as a human, does that affect their music in any way, or should it? Okay, well, this person was a convicted whatever, thus their music should be looked at in a different way, and perhaps taken out.
You can take other examples. You can say these people, these composers died in the concentration camps. How do we judge the music they've wrote while they were there? knowing that they might never get out.
And the interesting thing is, and I've got quite a bit of music that was written during the war by particularly Jewish composers during that were in concentration camps, and it's actually some of the most positive and hopeful music, and it kind of expresses the opposite of the situation these people found themselves in. And I mean, I find that enormously uplifting, sad as it is, because most of them didn't live much beyond sort of, 19 to 28 or whatever. But I think it sort of speaks to the human spirit.
Is the entire Bill Evans Riverside recordings on vinyl.
Nice.
I have had so much fun going back through and listening to the CDs with sort of new ears. And when you have a proper CD setup, where you've got a really great CD player and an amplifier, really great speakers, it changes how you experience the CDs completely. So I have had so much fun revisiting CDs that I have not revisited in years.
So I just got a pretty big collection of CDs, and most of them are sealed, like just, really nice ones though. There was a whole bunch of SA CDs, a whole bunch of really good jazz and blues. And going through that particular collection, I have never heard CDs sound that good. Bill Evans, different
Well,
jazz
those are all come from analog tapes.
Mm-hmm.
An analog tape. I mean, a recording that comes from an analog tape, if it's even moderately well transferred, it'll be better than most digital, that are DDD. Mm-hmm. The best sounding digital recordings generally are the AAD. The ADD are normally less good. Mm-hmm. And it's as I always say, that the less time the signal spends in the digital domain, the less damage it suffers. That really offends people, mm-hmm. I'm pleased to say. Mm-hmm. Because it is, this idea that you can have an analog. I mean, everything in the world is analog, it's not digital. So that you have an analog event, you can record it either on tape or you can record it digitally. The idea that when you do it analog on tape, it's a relatively short signal path, and there is very little processing if it's done properly. The second you have to go through an analog to digital converter, then you have to go through a digital to analog converter, and then you get a signal that you can process and put through your system. Now the idea that somehow you can go through those processes and the signal gets better than the original analog. I mean, I don't know where that kind of logic came from, but it certainly, it's the same logic that gave us electrical cars. It's just as idiotic. It's just extraordinary.
The last time I was at your house, we listened to your Idler Drive CD player.
Yeah.
And one of the first turntables that I got that I loved was the Lenco, which had Idler Drive.
Yeah.
And you can totally hear the difference.
There's a kind of stability to those designs. The problem is it's very, very difficult to make an idle drive that's also suspended. And the problem with that is that I mean, the mass-produced idler drives, if you look at BSR, not BSR, not what they called, there was a company up in Birmingham, they were producing 250,000 of idler drive mechanisms a week. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're producing at that level, the investment in plant and the investment in precision machinery and all sorts of things can be absolutely colossal. You can't do that with companies this size. The audio industry doesn't have any companies that size that can therefore make that kind of investment.
Well, the idler drive in your CD player, which will be smaller slightly smaller than a turntable. What does, like in layman's terms, if you're looking at like, zeros and ones of a CD and a digital to analog converter, what is it about that drive spinning it rather in contrast
the
to a belt?
drive, when we started with looking at this, we started with belt drive.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, when you look at the CD and the little tiny motor that comes with the CD drive, when you buy even the better one like the Philips CD Pro,
Mm-hmm.
the power supply, it's a digital power supply.
Mm-hmm.
So the motor basically, is not, it's not a smooth drive. It's not like it spins very smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is it basically, it steps. So it cogs, they go tick, 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 tick. And that has an influence on what the laser picks up. Then you have an error correction system which tries to correct that. But there is no possibility of having an error correction system that predicts what the error is going to be. So the error correction system will always correct an error after the time the error has occurred. Mm-hmm. And that has a masking effect on when you play and what comes out and you can hear. Mm-hmm. And what the belt drive did and what the idle drive does even better is remove a lot of the interference of the error correction, because now you have a much smoother movement of the CD. The CD is capable of stuff because CDs don't move at the same speed. It's not like an LP that runs at 33 RPM or 45 or whatever. And that you just have to maintain that speed. That's actually relatively easy. With a CD player, the speed increases and decreases. And as a result of that, those things also have an influence on the way the drive behaves.
So one thing, you're able to do less error correction because it knows that
reduces
system better.
The only real benefit that we can measure is that there is a distinct drop in the amount of work the error correction system is doing. Mm-hmm. And that must be because there are simply less errors generated by the drive itself. Mm-hmm. Of course, we have better power supplies. We have all sorts of other improvements that are directly related to get that system to work properly. Mm-hmm. But we're still working on because we're now down to things like mass equivalence in the drive to make the drive as fast and as agile as possible. Mm-hmm. At the moment, we're using a hyper expensive Swiss motor which costs $200 or something. You know, the motor that sits in a normal CD drive is like 70 cents or less. You know, and you don't need to be a professor to work out that that is a serious compromise. We can get Darko to give a much more thorough technical explanation for why this is better.
No, layman's terms is much better.
Yeah.
Darko's explanation would go over my head.
Yeah, no, but that's part of the problem.
What I'm understanding is
Problem with
basically
engineers.
you're getting your CD player to eat a better diet so that it needs less medications later.
That would be a way of putting it, yes. Mm-hmm. So, and your blood pressure also drops when the error correction system stops pissing your sound off.
Yeah, yeah.
So, it works on you as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I was walking down by the station. I saw a boy there. He had no patience. We got talking down by the river. He was wondering, how did we get here?
partie d'Agathe, je m'allonge sur le tapis, symphonie des bruits de couloir, les yeux ouverts à demi, je suis médusé. Par tous ces bruits, ces logos, si on disait que c'était la fin, à quoi tu repenserais en premier?
All the noise and information makes me want to close my eyes. Sometimes you wait a little while to see what's wrong and right. You wait a little while. Sometimes you wait a little while to see what's wrong and right. You wait a little while.
They talk about the treble, and then they talk about the mid-range, and then they talk about the bass.
While the death toll grows higher, and you hide in your mansions, while the young people's blood will.
I'm not sure what it is. Do you enjoy going to shows like the Tampa? Do you enjoy going and choosing music and
Look,
seeing the reaction?
I get to sit and pontificate for hours. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Perfect. You know, it's, and I meet a lot of people that I haven't. I'm gonna in 24, 25, 26. I'm gonna do a big farewell tour where I basically
Go around, nice.
go around to a lot of the shows. I go around and see a lot of the distributors. I go and visit a lot of the people in the you know, from the magazines and so on.
Do you usually bring certain bottles with you, or do you?
No, I tend to buy something at the airport. The company can buy me a 500-pound bottle of whiskey. I think that's only fair.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. People who work at AudioNote, it seems like a really cool family. Maybe people are sometimes coming and going, but it seems like built up over the years that it's people who you really enjoy working with. From top to
I would
bottom.
say yes, generally. I mean, you know, there's always, you know, trying to match people's expectations with what's possible when you employ 40, 50 people is pretty challenging, I have to say.
Expectations in their job description.
Well,
what they-
expectations of what they should be paid, what their conditions should be. And I think Britain is particularly difficult because Britain has a very high attrition rate in employment. People will change jobs very quickly.
You pay people very well.
We generally pay pretty well. We pay well over the average. I mean, I'd like to pay more, but again, you know, the principle's always been that we take out not a great deal as the owners. You know, we take out what we need. We don't take out stupid. You know, I've lived in this house for this year it'll be 39 years, and you know, I mean, with the kind of company we've got and the kind of money we've made over the last 15 years, we could be sitting in one of the big houses on them, and I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. I'm comfortable here. This is fine.
How do you, like Darko, for example, if you're working on something, is it pretty much, yeah, this is, I think, the result that we want to get to, or maybe that's obvious. We want to get something.
We basically, I mean, with these, we went through pretty much every material that we thought might be useful. We looked at
The field coil.
the magnets, the metal parts. We experimented with high voltage, low current, low voltage, high current. On the power supplies, we experimented with different ways of making the baskets for the magnet housing. It's blue sky insofar as it's possible to finance. I mean, we spent probably in the region of $500,000 developing these. And there aren't any there aren't any companies in the industry that does that kind of thing. I mean, I sat in a meeting this morning with Darko and Andy about the, we have a guy that came back to us because he found that when he left, he thought that you know, he moved back to Latvia, and he decided that you know, he really could be a better paid job there and have a better life there. He then realized, having lived in the UK, he did his degree in Edinburgh. And then he realized that actually what we do is kind of interesting and more challenging than sitting in a company where you're maybe better paid relative to the cost of living in Riga. But the work is boring and repetitive and just not interesting. So he came back to us and he took quite a significant pay cut. And he's a mathematician programmer. So he does some of the very complex programming that's coming out for the new DAC. But he's worked out how to get the kind of behavior out of the resistors that we use that nobody has ever managed to come here close to. One of the things he came to the conclusion, and this is fairly recent, that the test equipment and the test modules that he's been using are simply, they're not good enough to be able to show what the DAC can do. So they're the limitation. What he'd been working against was an assumption that the test gear was good and the DAC wasn't. He's now come to the conclusion, and how he came to that conclusion was that we put an AudioNote sound card, the one that Andy Grove designed, in the computer that he remotely accesses at the factory. We got this massively powerful scientific computer there that he used to work on when he was at work here as well. And suddenly it all fell into place. He could suddenly get the thing to do what he was looking for. And that meant he basically made a quantum leap pretty much over the weekend since Friday.
How is it working in the same company with your wife year after year?
But she hasn't murdered me yet. I'm sure she's considered it. No, I mean, we've worked together since we met. And you know, it's, as I said to her the other day when we sat in France and had a drink, we haven't done too badly. And it's been, you know, it's tough. But it's been tougher for her than it has for me. Because she's the one that, you know, when I was traveling 200 days a year building up the export markets, she was the one that looked after the home, the 2 kids, managed the factory, you know. So she is, but she's a northern lass. She's tough as nails. You know, they come with the expectation that it's going to be tough when they start.
And cut. It's hard to cut because it just keeps getting better.